This is the Late Round Podcast with your host, JJ Zacharisa.
What's up, everyone? It's JJ Zacharisa, and in this episode 983 of the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. If you missed it last week, I sat down with Jim Sonis to talk about this year's quarterback class. We've still got running back and wide receiver episodes to go, and today's episode is all about the running back. You guys have heard a lot of my takes on this class already. How I believe that this is the best group since 2017. How we could really see a ton of backfield turnover across the league because this class is so talented. But I want you guys to get takes from more than just me. So I brought on my friend Jagger, formerly of Football Guys. He's now doing work for FastDraft, to talk about this insanely good draft class. Jagger and I talked about his prospecting process, and then we go through and analyze most of the top backs in the class. It's a great primer for any of you who aren't totally prepared for what's to come at the end of the month. Now, before getting to the interview, I do want to mention that the Late Round Prospect Guide is ready to be consumed. You can head to lateround.com right now and purchase it for $19.99. The guide has a breakdown of what goes into my prospect and year 2 models. You get 80 prospect profile write-ups, you get scores for all relevant prospects, there's year 2 profiles, and more. It's 160 pages of information. Check it out now at lateround.com. And if you purchase before the draft, you'll automatically get the post-draft version of the guide as well. I do my best to get that post-draft version out to you the night of the last day of the draft. That way you're ready to crush your rookie drafts. That's all on lateround.com. Okay, now let's hear Jagger's take on this year's running back class. All right, Jagger, before we get into this running back class and the individual players in it, how would you just simply describe your overall process with prospecting? I don't love to throw this out because I think there's a lot more nuance to it, but if you were to sort of like bucket things in terms of film versus analytics, like what's your mix with those two things?
I'm a strong film guy, but what I've tried to do is emulate my own version of what Matt Harmon does. So, or like Lance Zierlein will do that as well, where I have a film grade, but I try to weight and balance that in a spreadsheet to where it's as objective as possible. So I'm breaking down, I'm breaking down a prospect down to their parts, and then I'm looking at the sum of those parts. Whereas like with my running back, can they catch passes? Do they have breakaway speed, contact balance, all these things to try to get a composite score? I know Dynasty Nerds does that as well, but not to toot my own horn, I feel like I've gotten away. I understand film in a way that I kind of know what's important. But I will say, since we're talking running backs, I do have to make some adjustments because the NFL adjusts. So that's another reason why I have something that I can quantify and I can go in the spreadsheet and weight things differently based on what the NFL is doing. You know, like the increase of pass catchers when we used to love bruisers so much.
Right. I think that's really important. Like one of the things that I really love about the modeling aspect of prospecting and just really is that you can very easily test. You can very easily go back and kind of look at things and say, okay, this is not correct, or this is working, this isn't working. And I think it's important to do that from like you're saying, from a film perspective, to be able to at least like have something to go back and look at, as opposed to just saying, yeah, I think this dude's good, you know, because if you're just doing that, you can be right, and you can have a great eye for it, and you can be really good at it. But if it's a simple, like, you know, sort of more subjective way of doing that, I feel like, and maybe you would disagree, but I feel like it's just a lot easier to then go back and sort of refine what you're doing and get better at what you're doing by having those benchmarks essentially listed there for you to remember and jog your memory and go back and look.
Yeah, and like the perfect example is Woody Marks. He's a prospect I've really liked, and my grade spit out a very good score, but I'm basically waiting to tell me for the NFL to tell me how much that looks, because I'm already anticipating that I'm going to have to make major adjustments on pass catchers because I've weighted them a little high. And like you said, I still think Woody Marks is a 10 out of 10 pass catcher, like arbitrary number. I'm not changing my perspective. I'm just changing how the algorithm perceives that, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Makes sense. All right. Well, let's talk about this class. Like, I look at it analytically. I watch these guys too. I have to always say that because I think people think that I'm only looking at a spreadsheet when I'm like writing up this giant prospect guide and stuff. But this running back class, you know, a lot of people are saying it's elite. A lot of my numbers definitely point in that direction. Would you agree? Do you think, let me say, if you were to rate this 0 to 10, I did this with Matt Waldman this past week too. If you were to rate the class 0 to 10, where on that scale would you rank it?
In my brief career in comparison to someone like Matt Waldman, it's a 10 for me because I haven't seen anything since like the Tank Bigsby class and stuff like where we were excited about Charbonnet, not just Gibbs and Bijan Robinson. And I think this class is better than that as far as the back end depth. So it's a 10 out of 10 for me. Yeah,
it's looking good, man. I mean, like you said, you're focused on pass catching, you said, and that being an important piece. I haven't seen a class of pass catchers this strong because I too weigh pass catching a lot within the model. It's really since 2017, like analytically, which is where we still have these monster running backs just doing crazy things in fantasy football to this day. I mean, 8 years later, So yeah, I think it's an elite class as well. But let's talk about these individual running backs now. Ashton Jeanty, he is the consensus RB1. There's talk that he could go 6th overall, as high as 6th overall to Vegas. I think that we're looking at a probably 50% or better chance that he would go top 10 because Chicago's sitting there. I mean, there's just a very good chance that he has great draft capital. Do you see Jeanty as being the RB1 and an elite prospect, or is there someone else that you think is close?
I think he's the RB1 and elite prospect. I have a heart, and this is me being a nerd, and I'm sure your audience out there are like nerd.
Yeah, we love that.
Yeah. It's I have a hard time thinking that anyone in the first round and the top of the first round, let's say like the Raiders are a big one. I don't think you guys deserve Jeanty. There's like so many other needs.
It's usually the case when it comes to running back too. Yeah. Totally agree.
So that's why I have a hard time. And here's where, when you compare Jeanty to other things, where I have a hard time putting him that highly. And let me get it in like Madden terms. I think Bijan Robinson is a 99 level prospect.
Yeah.
That like you're going to come in, he's going to transform your offense. I think Ashton Jeanty is like a 94 on Madden, which is still probably the second best running back on the game if you're into that stuff.
Right.
And it goes back down to the pass catching. I just don't think he's as elite of a downfield pass catcher as like Gibbs or Robinson. And with that being said, all the rest of these guys, let's say Trevion Henderson, they can have a better landing spot, and the draft capital doesn't matter. But by the end of the 2025 season, we're saying that they're closer to Jeanty than where we thought Jeanty was in comparison to Bijan Robinson.
Yeah. So it's almost a situation where Jeanty is the RB1. We both feel good about him being the RB1, but from your perspective, you're saying this class is good, very good, that you wouldn't be surprised if at the end of the year, similar to like, last year with the wide receiver class, where like Ladd McConkey now is up where Marvin Harrison Jr. is, right? Yep. Where everyone viewed Marvin Harrison Jr. as his can't miss prospect, et cetera, et cetera. But then, situationally and skill wise, talent wise, all that, McConkey did his thing his rookie year, and now he is, ranked right there ahead of, for most, Marvin Harrison Jr. So like are you saying like that you could see a scenario where, sure, Jeanty might be RB1 right now because he's an easy projection, but when it comes to how things actually go down, you could see a scenario where other running backs sort of close that gap.
100%. Like the Ladd McConkey comp is like perfect, because I think MHJ is still a good prospect, even though he disappointed. But I do think Ladd McConkey's probably the better value right now. That's why fantasy football, I tell everyone, it's not black and white, and it's not just straight rankings. Like there's a lot of different things.
A lot of gray area, a lot of nuance. All right, let's talk about Omarion Hampton then, because now a lot of these mocks have him, whether it's DJ or whomever. Mel Kiper's had him high. Kiper had him like a month ago or less than a month ago going 12th to Dallas. So like he's been, Hampton's been rising in these mock drafts. Do you think that he is the clear-cut RB2 in a tier of his own?
I think him and Henderson are neck and neck for me, and it's for different reasons. This is where I go back to like the Madden thing. I think they're both 92 overall running backs. One of them is just a straight downhill runner, and then the other one offers a little bit more upside in the passing game. But he may not get as many early touches, and he may always have like a David Montgomery with him. And again, that's just hypothetical right now.
Yeah, that being Henderson, you're saying with the
yes.
Yeah. So like, do you have any comps for Hampton? Like, is there a guy that comes to mind as you're watching him, and like you think that the kind of impact he might be able to make?
As far as comps, it reminds me a lot of Joe Mixon without a lot of the receiving on there, where you got just like a big guy with a lot of with enough speed to consistently give him the ball, where he's not like, well, why is David Montgomery plodding for 4 yards a carry or 3 yards a carry? It's not that. So that's what he reminds me of a little bit, is these Joe Mixon type super athletes that move quickly at a large size. So
yeah. I think like Hampton, to me, if he gets that first round capital, it's going to be easy for me to say he's RB2. I'll put him in a tier probably on his own just because the capital's there. Yeah. But the TreVeyon Henderson thing, it's interesting that I love that because he's my RB3 too. Or if he's your RB2, but regardless, TreVeyon Henderson, so you see him as a tier above the Quinshon Judkins, Caleb Johnson, or whomever after that.
Yes.
And do you have then Judkins and Johnson right below that, or things start, because that's around the point in time, because you get Genty RB1, a lot of people will have Hampton RB2, and then you get into like TreVeyon, Judkins, Caleb Johnson, and then there's like for a lot of people more of that like tier break there, but you see Henderson as a standalone RB3 or maybe even RB2, and then a gap until the Judkins, maybe Caleb Johnson tier.
Yeah, and then it's just because from a film standpoint, like one, he is probably the juiciest back, meaning that he's got one of the best burst scores. I think he has the highest recorded miles per hour out of this class. He has the best receiving upside, and I just can't ignore that compared to the other ones. And you nailed it. I have Judkins and Caleb Johnson right there as like another tier. And to give you an example of putting money where my mouth is, and I'm not saying that like Judkins or Johnson sucks, it's just that deep, is like I traded a second to get Caleb Johnson because someone drafted him one pick ahead of me in a startup in the 7th round. And I was just wow. I was so mad. I'm like, here's the second, just give him to me. I know I'm moving one pick. I still, and this goes back to the point why it's legendary. Like these RB5s, I'm trading decent amount of capital to get even in a startup to have as my RB2 in a starting lineup.
Yeah. So with Judkins and Johnson, do you have any pass catching concerns with those guys? Like Judkins in my prospect model has a below average breakout score, which is all based on receiving numbers now. He has, the best season reception share that's sub 9%. And the combination of those two things, we rarely see those kinds of players see 15% targets, even 12, 11% and 13% target shares. Can they be, 8, 9% target share players? Of course. But is there a concern from your perspective with Judkins as a receiver?
Judkins, no. Johnson, yes. Because Judkins, I've seen it, and I know, and this is where I tell everyone we're watching the games or not even watching the games, having context on how a team is built and runs their offense. Judkins can do it. They just I have Henderson and he's just better. So I'm just going to use him in a lot of these things. But we even saw in like the national championship game, I think, or somewhere in the playoffs where Judkins got a lot of that receiving work. Caleb Johnson, I never see anything downfield ever. So it's a lot of concern.
Yeah. I mean, also Iowa just doesn't throw the ball at all.
Correct.
And the first couple of years was really tough for him to compile, strong receiving numbers and just raw numbers. And even last year, at least his reception share rose. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem like Johnson is going to be a plus, at least, from a receiving standpoint. Cam Scadaboo has people all over the place in terms of evaluation. Where are you at with him?
What you have on the show sheet, is he overrated, underrated, or just right? I think he's now just right. He was overrated for so long, and we saw why. I just don't think he has top end speed and athleticism. And actually, I can give him credit on the athleticism because he did have a good broad jump and vertical, I think. So like that matters. He's so weird because he's getting a lot of David Montgomery comps, and I love Monty, but Cam Scadaboo's such a better and more nuanced receiver. I just don't know what to do with him because I don't know it's easy for me to see what the NFL how they'll use or how they'll view some of these other prospects, but not to sound crappy, but when you have like a slower white dude, they tend to undervalue these guys, and then you need a Bill Belichick out there to want to use them, and that's just me judging the NFL. So it's like I'm going to draft him in the 3rd round. I have a hard time taking him any earlier than that because historically, this is the type of guy that dynasty people will like more than the NFL does, and I'm just not willing to bet too highly on that.
Yeah, he has an interesting comp profile in the prospect guide, the late round prospect guide, where his high end one was Kareem Hunt, where again another player who could do it all and can play all 3 downs, and I think Kareem Hunt's probably a little bit better of a receiver, maybe better. I don't even know though. I mean, like especially analytically, like Cam Scadaboo has an unbelievably I think of any running back in this class, the only back who's better than Scadaboo from a production standpoint, an age-adjusted production standpoint, is probably Genty.
Yeah.
It's because his numbers are just wild. But again, the explosiveness, if you look at players historically, or at least over the last 15 or so years, who have had decent draft capital and had the type of explosive rate that Cam Scadaboo's had, it's like A.J. Dillon and Blake Corum. I think there's one other guy who has not been, anything like overly special at the NFL level. That's a concern, like you said, like the lack of explosiveness. And I think I agree where it's like, do you think that teams are going to see him as a true pass catcher that can handle a 12, 13% target share, or are they going to kind of typecast him in a way because of his size and his lack of explosiveness? Because teams generally will want to have a more explosive player back there when dumping the ball off, in those passing down situations.
Yeah, and it's and it gets, if you get even nerdier into like the X's and O's, if you think of someone like Sean McVay and all his subsidiaries and branches, they don't like using multiple backs. So like, it shows our hand. We want a guy. That's why Kyron Williams gets all that burn. He's like, he can block for us, he can run our scheme, and he can catch passes. I can't see that for Cam Scadaboo. Maybe the Chiefs, because Andy Reid doesn't care about a lot of the things that other people do. So that's why I'm willing to gamble, especially these early drafts, on Cam Scadaboo, but at a adjusted rate of 3rd round.
All right, let's talk about Dylan Sampson, someone I haven't really brought up that much on the show. I feel like he's someone though that if you look at like NFL mock draft database, if you look at some mock drafts, like he looks like a day 2 player to what the mock draft community is saying. Do you think that's warranted? Are you high on Sampson, or are there some concerns for you?
I am one of the biggest Tennessee Volunteer haters to ever walk the earth. And I was going to say that was going to go one or two directions. Either go lovers or haters, and you went in that direction. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's like, and I'm just being honest. I don't mean that like I actually like Tennessee as far as a school. One of my best friends went there. I've always watched them.
Sure.
It's just they have kind of a Disney offense, man. And they keep inflating these players. Like, let's look at Jalen Wright, someone who had one of the best speed scores out of last year's class.
Yep.
But he's a Stevie Wonder. He can't see, and that is a problem. I don't think Dylan Sampson's that bad, but my comp for him is Kyron Williams. And I think that, and I always tell people, whatever that means to you, that's what it is. Because like to me, Kyron Williams, you give me that, and I'm like, I don't like that unless he goes to the right situation where a team can utilize him for his skills. I will take notice of him then. But Dylan Sampson, I can't see him getting picked up by the Raiders or something like that, and him being this 15-touch back that is going to consistently be in fantasy rosters, just because Tennessee's offense continually puts out these guys that have a lot of tools but aren't exactly every down players.
Yeah, seems to have some explosiveness to his game. My analytical worry is that the receiving profile isn't that strong. Now, Again, you go back to the Tennessee stuff. You had Jalen Wright. You even had, Jalen Hyatt and Cedric Tillman and these wideouts who are, Hyatt had one of the most wonky and fraudulent, one of the most fraudulent production profiles. My model didn't mind it because it's not looking at the nuance the way that we would more subjectively look at the nuance. But Biletnikoff guy and was able to do crazy things out of the slot for Tennessee. But that's the kind of offense that we're dealing with, which to me just to me, it's like, if you're looking at Sampson, I don't think that he's like necessarily bad. I'm looking at Sampson when you have a situation like that, and you do have some like analytical red flags, and it's within a class like this. Like if Dylan Sampson were coming out last year, I don't like if this exact profile. I think that if we saw him as a day 2 pick, we probably wouldn't have as much criticism as we do this year, just because there are so many good running backs that you can choose from, and Dylan Sampson just seems to be that dude. Do you think that he's going to go day 2? Like, have you seen positive reports, or is it more? Do you think he's more of a day 3 guy? But do you think he could go day 2?
I think he's a day 3 guy, and if he and what I tell everyone, it matters more when people fall than when they rise, because it takes 32 teams to say no multiple times, but it only takes one team to say yes. So, could he go day 2? Yeah. Some of these other guys we're going to talk about, why would a team want to take Dylan Sampson when you can have higher upside, or you have a more defined role with some of these other dudes that we're going to talk about later, who are also day 3 guys? I'm not saying they're day 2.
Right. It's one of those things where it's like, yeah, it's possible for Dylan Sampson, but we're also trying to look at the median outcome here too, and the probable outcome. Let's talk about Damian Martinez. Where are you at with him? Because that's another player where I feel like, analytically, I definitely have some things that I will call out, but I do think that the film space and a lot of the folks who are looking things like without analytics involved, they seem to really like Martinez. Where are you at with him?
I like him a lot. I was a hater and reformed. It was a tale of 2 seasons with Damian Martinez on tape. His first one, I'm like, this guy looks like he transferred to a bigger school, and it doesn't look like it fits. But as the season went on and Cam Ward, that thing started to gel, he looked really good. And my comp for him is Ramondre Stevenson. And I think he's a good bruiser. He is capable as a receiver. He's not going to be doing anything downfield, but I definitely think he's not going to be a liability if you use him behind and close to the line of scrimmage. He is one of these 3rd and 4th round guys that I am targeting often. Like I know at the end of this draft cycle, by the beginning of the season, I'm going to have significantly more Damian Martinez than I'm going to have of Dylan Sampson, and probably Cam Scatterbo, just because of the upside and his cost.
Yeah, the cost I think is going to be there, because there's going to be morons like myself who say and point out the receiving stuff that you noted. I do want to say, though, number one, it definitely always scares me when I see a red flag with somebody, or I'm lower on somebody, and then smart people like yourself or Matt Waldman, because Waldman's really high on Martinez too, are saying the opposite, right? And they like him. One of the things that Waldman pointed out on Perspectives was that before he transferred to Miami, the offense that he was playing in, there was a lot of like quarterback movement where if you're running a play action and bootleg, then the quarterback's going to the one side of the field, Martinez is going to the other side, and the defense is focusing on Martinez because he's that good of a player and that good of a running back. And so it's opening things up for the offense. But in those situations, it's really difficult to get the running back the ball through the air, right? So the receiving stuff isn't necessarily going to be as strong. His best season reception share was only 5.4%, which is pretty low. That's definitely a number that is a red flag for me analytically. But again, I think that having the different perspectives on a guy like that is really, really important. And the more that I hear people like him, the more worried I am about the Zap model being like, maybe, I don't know exactly with Damian Martinez.
Well, you've told me how it works. It's the receiving thing. Because and this is what I tell people, like, I quote Ian Hartitz in my head all the time. It's like just a guy getting 1.5 fantasy points. Sometimes, right. Like Damian Martinez is probably going to be an Ian Hartitz tweet at some point on here, where it's like his high end upside is probably David Montgomery. I use Ramondre as like a stylistic comp. I don't think he's going to be eating 5 targets a game because there's no one.
But I don't think Ramondre Stevenson should be doing that. That's my point. Ramondre shouldn't even be getting that.
Yeah,
that's the thing. And again, I'm going to use this same example and sort of like way and philosophy that I look at running backs as pass catchers, as I talked about with Waldman and I've talked about before on the show. But I kind of see it as like, there's 3 buckets. They're either elite, they're bad, or they're just neutral. And the neutral group of pass catchers. You know, the elite guys, the CMCs, the Gibbs, whatever. And then the bad guys, you know, maybe at the NFL level, we're looking at like Gus Edwards or like, you know,
Phil Maffa.
Yeah, Phil Maffa. Exactly. Yeah. Or Kalel Mullings or like players that like you know it's unlikely that they're going to be pluses or even like fairly neutral as pass catchers at the next level. I think that Martinez to me is on the fringe of like neutral to probably not seeing, and that's where you're talking about where the ceiling comps come in of a Montgomery. But you know, like for like the statistical comps for him in the prospect model were like, you know, Mike Gillislee or like Chris Rodriguez, right? Another guy who big bodied guy who could get that early down work, but I don't know how much of a plus pass catcher he would be. Those aren't the high end comps, but I see what you're saying with like the Montgomery style. And I think that's helpful for people listening that if they're using this as sort of a primer for the running back position, Damian Martinez is a big body dude who can bulldoze some folks.
Yes. Yep.
All right, let's talk about DJ Giddens because I'm going back to the Waldman thing because it's fresh in my mind. And, you know, he's another obviously draft analyst and rookie analyst. He was lower on Giddens than I am. I was like, the model loves it, some DJ Giddens, and I'm really curious. Maybe you could break the tiebreaker between us.
It's hilarious because I avoid Matt Waldman all draft cycles, so I don't spit out the same thing. I already know what he's going to say. I was like, I just don't think has very good running technique compared to a lot of them. He runs really high. He doesn't have the best vision, but once he gets past that line of scrimmage, man, it's magical. So like, I get what some of these guys see, and especially when you think of like where he played at in the Big 12 or whatnot, there's something there. And I have him circled as like my come to Jesus players. What I talk about. James Cook is one. I've never liked James Cook's model. I've never liked James Cook. And then here I am, year 3, James Cook's after asking for $15K a year, and he probably deserves it. That's how I see DJ Giddens, because all of my complaints about James Cook, with the exception, I think DJ Giddens is more athletic, they kind of go hand in hand. So I think he's another one who's appropriately valued, but he's one where I'm going to pick Damian Martinez ahead of him just because I just think Damian Martinez is a more polished player. It
seems like Giddens is a guy who's going to look better in models than how you view him, because the athleticism is crazy for Giddens. I feel like, and we'll talk about Bashal Tutin here in a second, but I feel like if Tutin hadn't run the 40 that he did and had the speed score that he had, and maybe like Omarion Hampton not having like the crazy, you know, size, speed, and combination and athletic testing that he did, more people might be talking about DJ Giddens' combine. It just feels like it kind of flew under the radar just because everyone was fast at the combine. You know, everyone seemed to be athletic. But then he at least hit some baselines that I like to see players hitting analytically when it comes to pass catching. You know, he has decent enough size, all that kind of stuff. But I do like what you said really, really matches up with what Waldman said. So I think that, you know, folks listening, you know, if you've heard me say positive things about Giddens, it's again good to have this other angle, this other perspective to say, okay, yeah, there's like, to me, he looks like just given what I've talked about with you and what I talked about with Waldman, it feels like a very like low floor, high ceiling situation with
yes.
Giddens. Like it could absolutely hit in a big way. But to me, that's like kind of the perfect 3rd round rookie pick, right? At the end of the day, like that's the kind of dude that you probably want to invest in.
Yeah, that's like, and that's why I made the thing. It's like, I'd like to bet on these players, but like, I could see you betting. I'm not saying avoid, like Giddens, because like you said, man, like there's something magical there. And this is what sucks about the modern NFL is it's like, wow, that's a really talented person. The NFL is not going to take the time to work with him to make him better, and that's what sucks.
All right, let's talk about Bashal Tutin real quick because again, he crushed the combine. I think the combine might have made him a day 2 pick. Like maybe we see it happen. Whereas if he didn't have the combine he did in that 40 time that he had, there's almost no way he would be going day 2. Where are you at with Tutin and what you've seen?
You just kind of said it, man. I will say Tutin is one of these players when you're watching film. I've watched the Virginia Tech versus Miami game 1,000 times. Like sometimes like during that game, I was like, who is this kid? It's like zooming around there, and that's Tutin there. I feel like him a little bit how people were with Tyrone Tracy, where it's kind of like you're saying with DJ Giddens, is that I think he is someone that I am taking shots on in the 3rd and 4th round. He doesn't seem polished, but whereas like Giddens, I think is athletic, I think Tootin is a tier above. We're talking about elite, and he is at that level where probably an NFL team is like, maybe we should work with this kid and get something. So I like him enough, and I think the combine is something that matters more than it doesn't.
Yeah. I mean, look, he has, for me, one of the widest range of outcomes of any running back in this class. You know, like wild big playability. Like when you watch him, I mean, he's just his acceleration, his ability to get downfield and just make these huge plays, is his home run hitting ability really is wild. And which is why the model saw him in sort of like the Kenneth Walker mold in that way, like the go big or go home. Now Walker was a much more prolific rusher and had more ability coming out. So I'm not saying that like he is that, because on the other end it's Darrington Evans. You know, it's like that's just the way that I think things will go down with Bashaw Tootin. It comes down like the guys like Giddens, the guys like Tootin. Like, would you agree? And then if you want to throw Martinez in there and sort of like wrap this up, I see Martinez as a safer bet, but I think that because I think a team is going to be willing to give him some work, whereas I think there's a possibility Giddens and Tootin don't do anything, but there's also a possibility that they dominate and they crush wherever they end up getting drafted.
Yeah, it's like you nailed it. Damian Martinez, you're probably going to get something for at least like a season or two, and then maybe he'll wash out. But DJ Giddens and Tootin, you can get nothing or everything. It's totally like a coin flip there. Yeah, that's an interesting point there.
Yeah, it comes down to risk tolerance at the end of the day. All right, so we talked about a lot of the high-end guys. Are there any day 3 picks, round 3 to 5 rookie draft picks at running back that you're interested that maybe, I mean, whether or not others are interested in them or not, like guys that really pop for you?
I'm going to keep speaking the good word on Woody Marks. I think he's and then I see a place for him in the NFL. And I tell everyone he can be a team's poor man's Jahmyr Gibbs. And, you know, do I need to say homeless man for people not to get crazy? You know, there's a lot of receiving upside there. His RAS score doesn't blow anyone away, but it's average, but he's very polished. LaQuint Allen is another one where he's something. Whereas, like, is he J.D. McKissick? Maybe. Is he an every down back? Probably not at his size, but they're just such good receivers. It's hard for me not to think the NFL, especially now we live in a world where they use committee backs, where they don't get some burn.
Yeah, so you're really going after those pass catchers there with both of them. Yeah,
leaning hard.
Yeah, I mean, look, Allen has arguably the best receiving production profile in the class. I mean, it's wild. And then Woody Marks, obviously, you know, he got some of that work. Is there any concern for you that Marks played a little with Mike Leach, and there's been, you know, some receiving backs that have come out under Leach? Like, do you care about that, or are you just looking at traits at the end of the day? That you know, Leach has had like Max Borghi and some of these other backs that have come out that have had these gaudy receiving profiles. You know, Mark still did it without Leach, and rest in peace. But you know, is that part of your eval, or are you just like, I see what I see, and I'm seeing this with Woody Marks, and he looks like he can be a good pass catcher?
His film score that I have is purely off USC tape, because if you look at if you look at his historical, you're like, oh wow, he's the greatest receiving running back to ever walk. But it's like you said, that's like that Memphis offense was Memphis or Mississippi State? One of them.
Mississippi State,
yeah. Mississippi State was funky and fraudulent, but he kind of did. Everyone loved Marshawn Lloyd.
Yeah,
Marshawn Lloyd is more athletic. I'll give him there, but I think that Marks was way more productive, and there's a reason why he's just much more polished of a player.
Jagger, man, this was great. Appreciate the time. Anyone who wants to check out everything going on with Jagger, his work, head to Twitter. Give him a follow at JagSays. Make sure you're also checking out the Late Round Prospect Guide. Otherwise, I'll catch you later this week with another mailbag episode. Talk to you then.